Here we go. Let's continue on to part 2 of their December exam review number 1. So we're talking about the problems here in page 3, and we have a right triangle that is inscribed inside of a circle. First thing we need to do is be careful about what we're given and what we're looking for. The area of the disk is 100 pi square centimeters. So that is the circle pi r squared that we're going to be using the formula to find out the value of r. And then triangle ABC is isosceles. So let's be sure we recognize that the two sides that are congruent are going to be forming the right angle. Now we need to find the perimeter, so it's going to be based on finding the value of r. Pi r squared equals 100 pi. Now don't waste your time multiplying out 100 times pi, because the first thing I want to do to isolate the r squared is to divide both sides by pi, or basically cancel it from both sides. And we get r is going to be equal to the square root of 100, which is 10. So this piece here is 10 centimeters, and the other one is going to be 10 centimeters. Now you might want to say, oh, AB and BC must also be 10, but that's not true. You may also be inclined to try and figure out what this distance is. Yeah, it's r, but it's really not going to help us a lot, or at least it's going to delay what we're trying to figure out. We are trying to find out the perimeter, and so we're going to need the Pythagorean theorem for the two congruent sides, which I'm going to name both of these guys b. B squared plus b squared equals 20 squared. 20 is the diameter, the hypotenuse. Now, of course, we just did this in the previous question, where you have to divide both sides by 2 and then square root both sides to get that b is equal to the square root of 200, and you're going to get 14.14 when you work that out with a lot of repeating or non-repeating numbers. I need the perimeter of this, so I need to say this is going to be 14.14, 14.14, assuming we have to go for 2 decimal places. We add both of these plus 20 for a total of 48.28 continuing centimeters. And so our answer is the perimeter is 48.28 centimeters. Now be careful, because if the question had asked for the area, you would be doing the b times the b divided by 2, and it would actually work out to be a very nice number. Question 10 is asking you to find out the area of the the perimeter of the white region, and knowing that the shaded triangles are all right triangles. So looking at this a little bit, you might realize that there's a right triangle on the bottom right, and there's a right triangle at the bottom left, and a right triangle at the top. So first of all, let's look for the value of this triangle, which is 12 squared plus 16 squared equals c squared. Now you might recognize this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle that's multiplied by 4. However, if you don't realize that, the left side is going to be equal to 400, and you're going to square root both sides to get that c is equal to 20. To find out the missing side lengths in the triangle on the bottom left, we know the height of this is 16, so the missing side must be 15. And we can use Pythag again, but this time let's call this triangle A, call this triangle B, and we're going to be finding the missing side, not the hypotenuse. So we're going to be going 15 squared plus, I'll call this side length B squared is equal to a 25 squared, which again is another 3, 4, 5 triangle. B squared is going to be equal to 625 minus 15 squared, which is 225. So b squared 400 is going to be equal to, not 200, 20 centimeters. Now the third triangle, which is up here at the top, which I'll call C, is going to be 1 squared plus, now that I know the distance along the bottom here, is going to be 32. And that's going to be equal to the unknown, which again, this time I'll call it D, just for want of a better, different variable. 1 squared is equal to 1 plus 32 squared, which is equal to, I had it here somebody. Oh yeah, it's equal to 1024. So you're going to be square rooting 1025 to find out the length of D, which is approximately 32.01. Now, you may at this point say the white triangle is a right triangle, which rhymes, and it's actually true, but that does not necessarily have to occur. It is a coincidence that happens in this problem. So now, what am I asked? Oh yeah, let's find the perimeter. So the perimeter is going to be equal to 20 plus 25 plus this third amount, 32.01. And that gives us a final number of 77.01. So let's answer in a sentence. The perimeter is 32.01. No, it isn't. 77.01. centimeters. All right, and there's all your answers at the bottom. Number 11. Now this is the number theory stuff, and this stuff can get a little bit confusing, so let's remember some of the basics. First of all, looking and comparing the first 3 questions, interval notation we only use for real numbers, so hopefully you're going to recognize that. When you go to do the set builder notation, it's going to be real numbers. The solid line here is only going to be used for real numbers. And so, same deal, just because of those 2 situations, we know we're dealing with real numbers in both of those cases. What does the interval notation mean? You are including the -3, you are not including the 7. So I'll put some numbers here that will make it all fit. Let's say -4, -2, 0, 2, 4, 6. And it's just enough to get the 7. The -3 is going to be included. The 7 is going to be excluded, so it's going to be a hollow dot. And you use your ruler and you draw a very straight line that connects the 2 together, which says everything in between and the endpoint -3, but not the endpoint 7. So how do we write that? Well, this is a sandwich inequality, or at least it's a 2-sided. So I'm going to put the x in the middle. And remember, the symbols are always going to be pointing the same direction. -3 is the smallest number, and 7 is the biggest number. With one final detail, which one do I include? Since I'm including the -3, I will put the equals to underneath that inequality symbol. Now, we know that question B is real numbers, because that's given. So interval notation is required. And how do we describe x is greater than 18? Well, I'll put the 18 here. It doesn't have to be any particular place. And it's going to be greater than, so that means pointing to the right. And the value is going to be excluded because there is no equals to. The interval for this one goes from the lowest to the highest. Lowest value here is 18. And the highest value is going to be infinity. So you don't actually have to write any number, you just put the symbol infinity, and since it's in the positive side, we put the plus on it. And the bracket 18 is going to be not included, so it's turned away from it. And we never include infinity, so that's turned away from the infinity. As I said, reminder, all 3 of these questions are real numbers. So the last little detail I need in the third question is, this is another 1-sided inequality. The interval goes from the lowest number, which is -infinity, up until 8. 8 is included. Infinity is not. And there's your interval. The way I describe this, it's a 1-sided inequality, so I don't have to put x in the middle. In fact, I'll usually put x on the left side because it fits better. And I'm going to read exactly what it shows, that it's going to be less than or equal to 8. The values that we want are less than or equal to 8. and the squiggly brackets. Now the last two questions. These guys are exceptions to the rule because one of them is integers and the other one is reals. So it does not ask for the interval notation, it asks for the solution set. And so when we're doing this, let's just make sure that we realize what we're talking about. Integers that are less than 4. So if I put the 4, let's say here, negative 2, 0, negative 2, and a couple more numbers, less than 4. Now, you might be tempted to put the arrow pointing away from that, but you can't do that because we're talking about integers, which means we don't include the values in between. We only include the counting positive and negative numbers. So less than 4, the first one we encounter is negative 3, positive 3, then 2, 1, 0, and so on, all the way into the negatives with an arrowhead pointing to negative infinity. The solution set is not going to be an interval, it's going to be a list of values, okay? And I'm putting x as an element of, which I suppose I should have done for all of these questions. And I'm going to put my list. Now the lowest number is infinity, so I can't really show that. So instead I'll just put a dot 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 to say that we're starting from the left, from forever, and we're going to go all the way up, and I'll put in negative 2, and then negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and I don't put the 4. The set builder notation for this is going to include the integer set, so that means x is an element of z, and we're going to put the one-sided inequality that x is going to be less than 4. Now, if you had said less than or equal to 3, that would also have been acceptable. Final question. In natural numbers start at 0. So if I put my 0 here, this rest of it is not important. In fact, it shouldn't be there at all. 2, 4, 6. And the solution set, all natural numbers that are less than 5, which is not going to include the 5, but less than it, to the left, and the lowest we go is 0. That's all the natural numbers that are less than 5. The solution set for this is going to be the list starting at 0, and you always go from the bottom to the top, smallest to biggest, and that's going to go up to 4, and you stop. On the set building notation, x is an element of the natural numbers, or the whole numbers, and we're going to be going x is less than 5, or less than or equal to 4. But I like to stick with exactly the way it's stated in the question. It's a little bit safer. Hopefully this helps. You should still definitely review all your notes and be ready for these 2 or 3 topics for the test. Thanks. See you next time.